Okay. It's 6:30, so I'll call meeting number 1837 of the East Windsor Planning and Zoning Commission to order. We are holding both Zoom and in person tonight. We have in person is at 11 Rise Street, the town hall. And we have a quorum with all of our members present. We have no added agenda items.
We do.
Okay,
We have PZ 2022-24. It's a special use permit.
okay, it's under receipt of
Under
application.
receipt of application.
Yeah. But nothing beyond that.
No.
Okay, no legal notices.
No.
Okay. So the next item on the agenda is public participation. Is there something somebody wants to raise that is not listed on the agenda tonight? No one in the room? Okay, you're the only one online. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to approval of minutes. We received the minutes from our last meeting, 1836, which was October 11th. They were in our meeting packets. Did anybody see any concerns or errors that need to be addressed?
Nope.
No, okay, then a motion to approve the minutes would be in order.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of regular meeting 1836 that held on October 11th, 2022 as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Peg, that's unanimous. Under receipt of applications, an application came in today. It's application PZ 2022-24. It is site plan review and a special use permit pursuant to section 305.7B1. It's field worker housing at 100 Wapping Road in East Windsor. So we are just acknowledging receipt tonight, and that will be on a future agenda for discussion. Next order of business is Jesse Lane Bond, Hamlet Homes, under section 8 of the agenda.
We had reached out to Mark O'Neill, who's the developer, Jesse Lane, in reference to completing a series of improvements prior to going for road acceptance. If you remember last January, February timeframe, we had him come in with a renewed bond. And we had kind of put a timetable to get the construction completed this summer. So we touched base with him, and just yesterday, yesterday, he sent electronic versions of the as-built to Len for review. So I think that was the last thing we were waiting for Len to do his review of the as-built.
Well, they kind of waited, kind of late. They kind of waited till the last minute.
So then the next step is bond release after that.
Yes.
If Len is happy.
I'm
Road
sure that
acceptance,
looks good.
bond relief, if Len's happy, yeah. Yep. He needs to make sure it's built the way it was designed.
Okay, so there's no action on that tonight?
No.
Okay. Then we will move on to our continued public hearings. The first one being PZ 2022-19, 297 North Road. It's a special use permit for renewal for a soil management facility. The applicant is North Road Materials LLC. And this is a continuation of a public hearing that's gone on for a little while now.
Borrow your easel here. Sorry, Joe.
That's okay. Enough to talk about that.
For the record, J.R. Russo and Associates here representing the applicant for Road Materials. I have some full-size versions of that plan, but some of you have it. You've got the small one, so maybe you don't need it.
You want a full-size one?
I don't need a full-size one.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
With me tonight is Skip and Merrick Kemet, the applicants for this particular application. So at the last meeting we were at 2 weeks ago, Attorney Marion was here and talked to you a little bit about an extension of the permit for 2 years to allow them to work through some of the issues with material and testing and construction of the bins and so forth. And apparently Attorney Marion had a conflict. He is no longer employed by the chemists. So I'm his replacement. Sorry about that. I'm certainly no attorney, but I'll do my best to try and hopefully resolve some of the issues that you have before you here. And certainly we've got some difficult ones, and I know it puts you folks in a bad position, and the town planning staff in a rough position, as well as myself in a difficult position with a client. So today I had a conversation with Ruth about maybe a path of how to get through this and resolve some of the issues. And I think we made a little bit of headway, and then I had a meeting late this afternoon with the chemists, and they gave me some information that I did not have. That's going to make me change maybe the path a little bit, but maybe ultimately get to the same location. So as you are aware, some of the issues here, there's been a cease and desist order that was issued some weeks back by planning staff with regard to material that was deposited out of the permitted area, as well as some dredge material that had not been tested that's within the area that it's supposed to be in, but we need to do some testing and confirm whether it's clean or not clean, as well as the area on the side slope. The plan that you have shows a revision to include that side slope fill within section 1 or phase 1 of the plan. However, that may or may not change as we move forward, but what I would like to share with you tonight is that Merrick, and I don't know if you were all aware that Merrick is a professional engineer and a land surveyor and spent a number of years working at Anchor Engineering. He's no longer employed there, but one of his associates, Scott Atkin, who was an LEP, is employed there. And he's actually been before some Frank I know was here. I'm sorry to pick on you, Frank, but and Jim was probably here. Maybe Mike, I don't remember. With some other applications that involved gravel removal next to NORCAP. And Scott represented at the time probably Dennis Botticello, I think, with regard to the plume around NORCAP and can we excavate gravel, is it safe, so on and so forth. So anyway, Merrick worked with Scott for a number of years, and he talked to Scott today. Apparently he'd been away on vacation. Lucky guy. In Hawaii. My vacation was at the Cape. I was a little short of Hawaii, but at any rate. And they have contracted with his company and him specifically to perform the work that's necessary to get us hopefully the ability to either determine whether, okay, this material's got to come out of here and it's got to go somewhere else, or it's clean and it can stay here. And Merrick brought me copies, and I'm going to share one with each here just so you can see this, because I know we've been telling the staff all along that we've got an LEP. I don't know that we ever had a name of an LEP. We do now. And I know Scott, I've worked with him before. I think they're a pretty good company, and I think we maybe are making some headway in terms of being able to move forward here.
Thank you.
Um,
Sure.
There you go. So in Merrick's discussion with Scott today, he seemed to think that he could do some of this work fairly quickly. Now, obviously, as you heard at the last meeting, the Clements would like you to renew their permit and extend it. And I understand that that's difficult for you to do when you have your staff telling you that no, because of what's happened here, they're not in compliance with their permit and you can't renew it and you can't extend it. We certainly would like to see you do that, and I understand that it's maybe something that you can't do tonight. We would ask you to allow us to extend, and I think we have the time to extend till your next meeting in 2 weeks, to allow Scott to do some work and hopefully come up with some results that we can share with the staff and share with you, and allow us a little more time to work with Ruth in the planning office to see if we can come up with a path or a resolution to allow us or you to maybe approve something, and maybe it's only a short permit to allow us to move forward and be able to build some bins. We've got some clean material, some dirty material. How are we going to handle it? And try to work through the cease and desist order and this application kind of at the same time to allow us a little bit of working room to be able to move forward. And we're hopeful that that can happen, but maybe it can't. I guess the worst case scenario is it's a denial without prejudice, which is what staff is recommending. And then we continue to work through the cease and desist order and probably come back with another application at some point in time, but we'd rather not go the route if that's possible. So certainly we'd love to see you approve it tonight and maybe give us a 6-month permit, but I'm thinking that's not going to happen. So we would, yes.
Have you talked to the town planner about reapplying? What's the best approach? And did she give you any input into that?
We haven't discussed that specifically yet, but we did talk about it a little bit today. We actually talked about withdrawing the application, working through the cease and desist with some testing and so forth, and then reapplying with a new application.
And there was no indication that's the best route to go or not.
Well, we're hopeful now, based on what we have here, that maybe we might be able to get through some of this in the next couple of weeks and be able to find a path or a route to a permit, maybe a short permit, to allow us to move forward. So we're asking that you allow us to grant you another extension for 2 weeks to get us to the next meeting. Give Scott Atkins some time to do some work and maybe us some more time to talk with the staff to see if we can come up with a suitable solution to this.
And your attorney hasn't advised you as to what path to take.
Well,
Next attorney, I guess.
He hasn't advised me. No, I don't think so. No. He has not.
If I could speak real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Merrick Hammett, North Row Materials. The issue is that with the cease and desist order and a special permit, now it's kind of intertwined, the way we see it. The 2 points that the 2 major points of the issue is, one is that we've extended past our limits. So with the permit renewal, we're here to modify that plan to begin conformance. So then that issue, it goes right out the window. So that's why we're still moving forward with the plan, with an amendment to incorporate the area that we disturbed. The other part is the actual questionable material that's out there. We can't install the bins. So without installing the bins, we can't take that material, put it in the bin. If the material was in the bins, we're in complete compliance for the permit. That's simple. And that goes away. So it's kind of intertwined. So we could get the extension to put the bins in, to get the material into the bins where it's supposed to be properly located. Then that cease and desist order item is out the window. And same with the filling area. If we can get the amendment of that area, then the entire cease and desist order is gone and we move forward. So, and my point is, why withdraw something? We're almost so close right there to rectify all this stuff.
I have a question. Why can't you construct bins without having a earth filling permit?
We have a cease and desist order right now, and that's part of the.
For the filling and the bringing in of materials. But you also said you have a grandfathered construction yard permit. You should be able to construct bins under your construction yard,
Not in that area. We're not allowed to do any processing or anything for the permit.
not processing, just building bins. It's strictly construction.
The way I read the permit was that the bins were part of the permit. So if that's the case, then we would need more time to put the bins in. We can make that work, but that's not gonna happen. Then at least take a few weeks to get that done. We have to purchase the blocks and get them in place.
I really think 2 weeks isn't gonna hurt anything. See where you're at. Give 'em 2
And we
weeks.
kind of lost last week or last meeting due to the big other meeting that you had. So we really didn't get an opportunity to really discuss this with you. Candidly this way. So
Well,
I know we're not gonna be able to get a full permit renewal, but if we can at least get 6 months just to get us out of the cease and desist order and to move forward and come back to you in 6 months.
Well, I'm thinking under a cease and desist, there has to be activity allowed to allow you to come into compliance. So any activities you need to come back into compliance should be covered under the cease and desist order.
Or negotiated under the enforcement action.
I see this as two different pathways, and yes, they're intertwined because it's the same site and the activity. There's the special use permit application for the soil management facility and landfilling. And in section 814, if you're looking at the special use permit, if you're not in compliance with that section of the regulations,
It's enough.
you really can't extend it, right? Separate from that is a cease and desist order, which yes, in there, there's a requirement to come forward to seek a permit for the excavation of the material. Part of that is the LEP, you know, doing the assessment. And the appropriate sampling is that professional sees fit to determine what it is there. Does it need, would it be better to leave it? Should some of it come out? Should, you know, what's there, right? And then an application to carry that out. And part of that application could be building the bins so that you can function.
If that's
Just
part
like
of
you're
what they
saying.
need to come into compliance, it should be covered under the cease and desist.
Right, and that's one of the items that in the cease and desist is to submit a permit for the
For the rectification and
the remediation.
Keep in mind, the original permit did not require us to have an LEC. That was probably an oversight on everybody's part back in the day, so. you know, obviously we understand.
Just give them 2 weeks and see where they're at.
I
It
believe
ain't gonna hurt.
in the statutory range. I mean, we've extended this thing so many times.
Attorney Merriam had done an assessment and brought it to the November 8th. That Merrick was just talking about that. He did that assessment, and then I spoke with Brian McCann, who's one of the attorneys at home that we work with. And he did confirm to me that if we were to close a public hearing on the 8th, we would still have the 65 days to deliberate and decide.
You're good.
So that's where that stands.
I
But
guess,
I will just reiterate that to me, it's two paths.
Mhm.
Cease and desist should be running outside of the special use permit.
I guess my underlying problem is what the applicant is calling claimed fill. Without an LEP and without an assessment of the site, it may not be claimed fill. And yes, it's there, but we don't know, and the definition of claim changes over time because the remediation standards are science-based standards. And new chemicals come into play, like the PFAS, and long ago it was EDB, but it's just the intent of the regs are for earth filling is to keep things clean and the land to be reusable. We've had people talk about the Scantic River and all the towns have put into that corridor. I'm still having a challenge without, I'll say, determination of full compliance. Just hiring an LEP, in my mind, doesn't solve the problem. We need the assessment of the site that shows compliance. So I'm not sure 2 weeks will get us there. I'm not opposed to 2 weeks, but the bottom line for me is the LEP needs to assess the site, not one sample. And whether one sample is clean or not clean, because we don't know what's gone in there.
We won't know unless we give them time.
But at some point, you know, we'll run out of time. 2 weeks is, I don't know that that's enough, but if it is, that's okay.
But we'll know in 2 weeks whether it's yea or nay. That's our deadline.
So this is the public hearing. We haven't closed the public hearing. They're asking to extend the public hearing. Is there anybody from the audience who would like to comment? In the room? No? Anybody online who wants to comment? Last call for comments.
I have one, I guess, question, not necessarily a comment. So assuming that we extend the meeting tonight for 2 weeks to your next meeting in November. And the LEP continues to work forward and does whatever he has to do, comes up with a protocol and how it needs to be done, and does his sampling and testing. Maybe we have our results, maybe we don't. We need to close the hearing at the next meeting because we're out of time. We don't necessarily have to make a decision that night. Obviously, we have a number of days, months to make the decision.
But can we take evidence after the
My
hearing is closed?
question would be, can the applicant or the professional still correspond with your staff in terms of providing testing results or whatever it might be after the hearing is closed?
I think the record's closed at that point, but you can correspond with staff, right? It's just, the record is the record at the time it closes.
I don't think so.
Yeah, my understanding is there can be no further discussion on the matter.
With us,
Had-
we discuss.
Right.
What's our consultant have to say on that?
Mike, what's your opinion?
I think that you're right. You can't take new information after the hearing closes.
That's what I
The information that's in the staff report or whatever information you use that she prepares has got to include in what you reviewed.
Can't be anything additional.
The decision and the criteria used to make the decision has to be found within the public hearing record. So sure, Ruth can talk to staff, they can have conversations, but introducing new information as to her being a conduit to you.
It can't be in her memo stuff.
And it puts her translation of that information at stake, right? Because if she interprets it and says, this is a no fly. And then she conveys that to you, there's no. I'm not putting words in her mouth, but I wouldn't want to be in that position
Okay.
given the
So
information.
I think you got your answer when it.
I got the
closed,
answer.
it's
That was the
closed.
question. I got the answer.
The answer is no.
So, Ruth, do I understand this correctly, saying that there should be a separate permit application for remediation and compliance?
Yes,
Okay. And that can happen regardless of what happens with this.
correct. It's two different,
Okay, so
Two
that's
different
the
tracks.
path that's advised for the applicant to do a separate application.
If the material is not clean fill.
Well, regardless, you still have other things that you need to do to come in compliance. So like you say, building your bins and other things that you require to come into compliance,
Right, but like,
that should be handled under a separate application.
I suppose, yeah, if that's the case.
And the quantity of fill was in excess of what was allowed, right? So it's not just
It's-
clean, it's quantity. too.
No,
It's
we're allowed a
out,
million yards.
it's outside of the area
Bounds that was approved.
that was approved.
And that's what we're trying to
So-
modify as well.
So after the fact, redraw the line is, you know, what's being proposed.
So that would partially be part of the remediation application or not?
Well, there's the cease and desist and coming, you know, figuring out. There's material out here that wasn't permitted when it was deposited, right? So they're proposing to leave it because they think it's gonna do more harm than good. We need to know what it
It's
is,
gotta be some boring stuff.
right? So that's what the LEP will ascertain and come out with a professional opinion as to what to do with the material. Which is that part of the cease and desist piece that typically is done between staff and legal and the property owners. The special use permit for this whole operation, right, is gonna come in with the map
That's
that's
accurate
gonna
and
end up
stamped by a-
however, right? And the proposal, like if the remediation requires bins in order to, if there's stuff that has to be removed and staged and assessed, certainly that could be part of
The application.
the other, the application for that. But
So we'd call it a compliance application or return to compliance application.
it would, an excavation restoration.
Can the testing be done in 2 weeks? Everything you have to test?
That's gonna go to Scott. I really don't know.
You have a scope of what you're testing or what, or you've got, it's already worked that out, or it's, I'm going here, here and there.
Well, he's gonna have
How
a
many
protocol.
borings?
Well, we've already had a testing of the questionable material. So the analyticals are out there for that one, which he needs to review. As regarding the other one, we do have all the material slips for that site, so that's gonna be once again up to him whether he determines whether it needs to be tested or not. We have all the information, we have a documentation of all the materials there.
Seems to me he'd have to do borings on the site and at
I can't speak for
specified
him.
locations and see
That's
if
gonna be up to
it's
the
clean or
professional.
not clean.
Your best guess, can you get it done in 2 weeks?
For the material on, I don't know. My best guess, it's gonna be real close.
Yeah.
Yeah, and his memo to you, he did say within a week. But I don't know.
Jay, what do you think? You
I think
guys
it-
obviously
it's
have
gonna-
more insight than we do on
I
what you're
think it-
exactly
I
testing.
think it could be done, yes. I think it's a matter of expediting the stuff at the lab. Because typically they wouldn't be able to do it that quickly, but you can expedite the testing. It obviously costs more money, but that can be done. So I think it's a possibility that the results could be back in less than 2 weeks and you could have some information at your meeting.
There's other outlets around
too.
So if you come back in 2 weeks and we don't have all the tests, then what do we do? Where
We're closing the hearing.
the
and-
hearing has to be closed no matter what in 2 weeks.
See,
And then we make a decision.
it seems to me that the more we get into this whole problem. That the course, my course would be to just have a new application. Because now we're getting all these questions that's statute wise, there's maybe a little shaky, or maybe we aren't interpreting them correctly. It seems to me it would be a lot easier on me if I were voting them to come in clean, and I wouldn't have to worry about, am I doing this correctly or what? But that's only my personal.
Well, we have, in my mind, two options. We could continue the public hearing, or we can close the public hearing. That's what's on the table at this point. Yes,
Just for clarification, so the permit to remediate the site hasn't been put forth yet by that concerns me because we wasted a month already. They're not even sure they're gonna be done in 2 weeks. And I have to agree with, Mr. Gavi over there. I was sitting up there, is another 2 week gonna change anything with the cease and desist? Because they haven't even started remediating anything yet, and they haven't taken any initiative to start it.
Well, today they hired somebody.
That should have been done a month ago, in my opinion, as a public that's concerned. But that's all I gotta say. Thank you.
I think it would take a lot of pressure off the commissioners. To make the correct decision, and the right, obviously, the correct decision, if in fact it was started new.
But
Even
that,
though we
that
have
would
some-
require them to withdraw or us to deny and
That's
then
up-
start again.
That's not for me to determine, but that would be my, as a commissioner, that would be my concern.
At the end of the day, we need the LEP to determine whether a material is clean or not. So you can just allow it for 2 weeks. If we're not gonna know by then obviously we already know which route it's gonna be. You know, that's pretty simple. So I don't see what the harm is with 2 weeks. As far as remediation plan, there cannot be a remediation plan because we don't know if it's dirty or not. And that's what we need the LEP for. So we need the LEP. So
I personally, I agree.
we're just asking for 2 more weeks. Done.
Okay, at this point, I guess, instead of going round and round, do you want me to poll the commission and see if people
I think
wanna
that's a good idea.
extend or close?
I say extend and leave the public open.
Okay, Dave, where do you stand?
I'll say extend it for 2 weeks.
Joe?
Doesn't matter if we leave it open for 2 more weeks. I
Okay, we have our,
mean, does it?
Does it matter?
Yeah.
Well, I guess
Because
that's
in
how
2
you
weeks-
interpret what's been presented. I mean, in 2 weeks, they may have information, but will that site be in compliance with the approved plans from
no,
previous? The lines have been redrawn. So
My
that's-
understanding is that this is not really a renewal of a permit, it's really a new permit. Because technically the permit has expired. So
and we can't grant a permit unless it's in compliance with section 814 of the regulations. So,
I mean, personally,
they asked for
I
a
think they admitted their guilt and they made
Yes.
mistakes, whether intentionally or not, that's been
That's-
admitted to.
Mhm.
I think now the process is, how do we deal with this fairly? And with a clear mind as a commissioner, luckily, I guess I don't have to vote on this because it's a difficult one, but I'd like to see it start over.
we have 3 people who want to extend, and that's a majority, so.
2 weeks is fine with me.
But I'm not voting, but I think that's.
Yep,
All right, well, then I'll make a motion that we continue the public hearing of PZ 2022-19, special use permit renewal for soil management facility at 297 North Road, the Kennett Family Limited Partnership, until our next meeting, which will be November 8th, 2022.
is there a second to that motion?
Second.
We have a second, any discussion? I guess under discussion, I don't see harm in extending, but I don't see this is the path to the solution. So it just delaying us getting on the path, as Frank said. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
I'm opposed.
thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
Okay, we're now on PZ 2022-23, 14 North Road. It's a special use permit for a site modification. The applicant is Don's Auto Care Center. I think we had a few open items from last time. Sandra, Jay, who's gonna give us the update?
Pardon me, we're still gathering our things together here. For the record, Jay Hurd, J.R. Russo, representing 14 North Road Realty, Donzalo. An application for a solar canopy to provide some superchargers for electric cars to charge and some vacuums for vehicles coming out of the car wash. So at the last meeting, I showed you a basically structural plan of the canopy itself, which showed the steel, and we've been kind of going back and forth with the folks who are putting that together, telling them, well, we need to see what it's going to look like. We want to see colors, you know, what kind of a roof does it have, and it's been a struggle, and truthfully, we still haven't gotten there, but we got some pictures of some others that they did, and I made copies, and these are not truly representative of what it's going to be, because these are large applications. They're not a small 20-something by 40-something canopy that we're looking at. These are substantially larger in size, but in terms of the overall construction, which is similar than some of these. And one of these is actually, these are by the same company.
This one's at USA Hauling, that made that right now.
It is. This is the one with the green is actually at USA over on Mullen Road.
Yeah.
And even that one is substantially larger and I think taller than what this is going to be, but it's similar. And there's another one in there that's got an overhead view that shows you what the panels look like on top of the metal roofing material. So you kind of got a feel, although honestly, you're not going to see that because this will be slightly sloped towards the building. So none of that's going to be visible from the road, but
Like I said, this isn't still one there.
at least it gives you some feel for what it might look like. The canopy will have lighting. Here's a cut sheet. These are LEDs that'll go up underneath the canopy itself to provide light.
That's all you need.
For somebody who is trying to charge their car or vacuum their car or charge their car and vacuum their car. Staff. Now, we also have here a metal color chart. So when you look at this, and none of these are exactly the same, but the one that the structural drawing that we had shows the metal I-beams that support the roof, the purlins, and I think they're 14 inches or 16 inches. And then the I-beams below it that support the purlins are either 16 or 14, but in total there's 30 inches there. So there's a fairly wide band, if you will, that'll be covered in a similar to what you would see a siding guy use with a brake, you know, where they're doing the trim work. It'll be an aluminum material. And this is the color. It's a medium bronze color that kind of matches the banding on the existing building. Yeah. So that's what's there on the building now. So they more or less match that same color that the building has. Yes, we did. We have them proposed. So that gives you a feel of what that banding would look like. And then this one is a layout of the location of the vacuums and the superchargers. And it shows a picture of a car wash somewhere else, I don't know where, kind of how these vacuums are mounted, which are essentially off the ground. Similar to, and I don't know if anybody's been to the new Soapy Noble car wash yet or driven by it.
Yep.
Those vacuums are attached to a pedestal that's anchored into the ground. They don't actually sit on the ground. These will not either.
And the difference between those at the Soapy Noble and ours is we have only one arch. So the Soapy Noble has 2 per car. So you drive up and then they go from wand to wand. This is a lot less busy. So it's just one arch that gets swung over.
Right, it swings.
And then you use that one arch, and then when it's done, it automatically retracts to the position in which you see on the drawing.
Okay.
So it keeps it kind of neat looking. Yeah.
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 Yeah, so it can swing from either side of the car. Not Soapy Noble's not like that. There's a new wash that's down in Vernon Circle that is also not like that. You drive into the area where the vacuums are and it's got a hose on either side. You just walk around your car and you pull the hose off, but it's a whole different setup because it's got a central vac system that's located out the back of the building, and the things, I guess it runs all the time, I believe.
Yeah. Whenever the man.
You just pull out the hose and it starts. It starts, right?
Like
It's-
to go back in your house.
Yeah, it's like a central back system in your house, essentially, exactly. That's exactly what it's like. So this gives you a kind of a feel for what this is gonna look like, and we're still thinking that we're gonna get a drawing from Mayberry, who's doing the structural, and the folks from Green Earth, I guess, that are actually putting the solar thing together. They gotta bring their drawings together so we can see exactly what this thing's gonna look like when it's done, which we think we'll have, but we thought it would be helpful to at least give you this information so you got some feel, you see what the color of the banding was gonna be, some idea what this thing's gonna look like when it's finished. I don't expect that the concrete columns holding up the steel here that you see on these is going to be as high. Those are, at least in my eyes, very high. They look like they're probably like 4 feet out of the ground. I'm not sure what the reasoning for that is.
People driving.
Yeah.
Well, I know you don't, if somebody drives in, you want to hit the concrete, but unless you're driving a tank, I don't know how you're going to hit something that's that high off the ground, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure about that as well. And I did take a ride over to Mullen Road and I looked at those structures as well because, and I apologize to you guys. I know that you've worked really hard to help us push this through. I want to go on record for saying that. But yeah, I don't know if I would agree to the pillar and column being so high. Just for a visual, it's not something that I would like in the front of the building as well. I think we much lower column, just a more of a beam still from the column up. I don't like that either.
Are you proposing a gutter system like Simon here also? Or are you gonna sheet drain off of it?
There will be a gutter system. It will be directed, and I apologize for not having information for you guys, but there is an actual gutter right on the, I guess it would be the east side of the structure. So everything will be directed straight from that directly into the gutter. So there'll be no runoff into the road or into the driveway or anything like
Right,
that.
there's a drain actually right here that's located right next to this, and then you can allow it into that, it goes into the drainage system. Yeah, so it doesn't, it's not gonna run out into the street or out into down the driveway and create a nuisance situation in the winter times and cold weather once. It'll go directly into the drain that's located right next to the canopy itself.
So they'll probably have to put Ballard in front of that transformer in case somebody hits the gap. instead of the break.
that'll have
That'll have bollards, and we're gonna add the soil erosion that's mentioned in the town engineer's memo along the downward slope of the underground trenching coming in from the pole. It's actually fairly simple to put the whole thing together, but it seems like it's been difficult to get it drawn.
And I apologize, we just assumed that Green Earth was going to be able to provide us, pretty much like an engineering drawing, and it just. Things go the way they're going, we weren't able to pull that together for you, but. We should have something more accurate, hopefully within a couple of days. That we could present to you guys.
Building inspectors, they want to stand trial.
Yeah, I actually talked to Mayberry about that yesterday when I talked to them. I mentioned it to Don, that we're gonna need, it's a structural drawing, but it needs a lot more detail. How are the connections made? How are the footings? How deep are they? How are we anchored to the concrete? There's a whole lot of detail that's not quite there yet, which assumably is coming because the plan that they have right now is not suitable for getting built, certainly. One thing that can be done, and I know Don just mentioned it, in terms of the concrete footing for the steel columns. Certainly you want it up high enough so that somebody did hit it, it's not going to damage the steel. But they do make, and I've seen these in a few places, maybe the airport, Southern Ottawash, and they actually make a poly cover, if you will, that goes around these things that makes them look and become a different colors, a whole lot better than looking at a concrete pier, if you will, although at least at USA Hauling, they painted them so they match the color of the steel, but there are, there's ways to dress them up. Make them a little nicer, and those poly covers is one way to do it. They actually do it pretty nice.
We're at this stage, we're just looking at special use permit and site plan modification, so we don't need the engineering details that they will for the construction.
For construction.
Right.
One thing that I didn't hear about was signage.
Signage, will there be a sign on the station?
I actually discussed this, I think the last meeting, there's a sign on the front of the building that we got permitting for due to obviously the street front and all that stuff. We would be willing, obviously, to take that down in consideration to maybe put some signing on the structure, which would be a lot more visible to the passerbys and potential customers. So that was one of my thoughts as far as being able to still fall within the criteria of what's allowed for the town. Because honestly, with the canopy where it's at, especially from the heading westbound, you won't see the sign on the building because of the canopy. So I would.
And you have your monument sign out front.
Yeah, right. We have that as well. Yeah.
So there may be some modification of signage, maybe some removal and some addition, but all of that would have to conform with the regulation.
Right,
Through the
with
zoning
town.
permit through the planning office anyway. And at this point, sounds like Don's got some ideas what he wants to do, but not positive on how it may all go together.
So is a signage plan necessary for the site plan? Or you can have
No,
that separate?
they can get a
Okay.
time permit separately.
Okay.
I'd want to look to see it, that it's not a second tree, like.
Yeah, right. Not another monument, right?
Yes. Yeah. I just wasn't sure if there was something planned for.
They should.
It won't be one of those continually revolving electronic
Yeah.
signs that a lot of people seem to.
We'd like to make it Vegas, but maybe
No.
not. Big fountains, maybe.
Any other questions from the commission? This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the room who would like to comment on this? Anybody online? Well, it's just. So, we, according to the memo, need to close today. Because we have to close the hearing by 11/1/22. Anybody have a problem with closing the public hearing?
No,
Yeah, I mean, everything that he spoke about that they want to add is really not necessary for site plan approval modification. It's more for their permitting for construction, so.
I think we
I
have
think
what
we have.
we need. So does somebody want to make a motion to close the public hearing?
Sure, I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing on application PZ 2022-23, a site plan modification and special use permit for 14 North Road, Don's Auto Care Center, owner is 14 North Road Realty LLC.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? That, Peg, that's unanimous. So the hearing is
I apologize. Who was your second?
Dave.
Dave,
Thank you.
That brings us to the approval process. And wasn't there a setback issue?
There's two motions.
Yeah, I didn't. Okay, well, I'll leave it to you to make
Okay.
motions because I don't have.
All right, so the first motion that we need to consider is granting a 50% reduction of the front side yard setbacks. So I will make a motion to grant the 50% reduction to the front and side yard setbacks for application PZ 2022-23 for the installation of a solar canopy as allowed by section 601.8C of the East Windsor zoning regulations. The findings are, number one, the proposed location will not disrupt on-site traffic circulation. And finding number two, any increased drainage or runoff generated by the proposed canopy will not be discharged toward adjacent property lines. Item number three, is the canopy design and proposed location will not create glare to adjacent properties. And item number four, the purpose of the proposed canopy is supported by the submitted application materials is to reduce the overall dependency of the building or tenant on traditional energy systems.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Peg, seconded by Dave. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Peg, that's unanimous. Okay,
Okay, and the second motion, I'll make your motion to approve application PZ 2022-23 for a site plan modification and special use permit 14 North Road, Don's Auto Care Center owned by 14 North Road Realty LLC, the applicant being Don Walker. This approval is granted and subject to the conformance with reference plans as may be modified by the commission and this approval and following conditions / modifications. There's items 1 through 14 on a memo from Ruth Ann Calabrese, Director of Planning and Development, dated October 10th, 2022.
is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Dave. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous, Peg.
Thank you.
You've got your approvals.
Thank you very much.
Okay. We have no new public hearings, no old business, no new business. That brings us to the update on Warehouse Point Design District.
So about 2 weeks ago now, Ruth, Dan, myself and Danielle sat down and basically reviewed the maps and the neighborhood that we're kind of scoping for the ultimate, to be the recipient of these zones and sketched up some fairly ugly but very interactive maps of how we think we would distribute these zones. And what I'm working on, and I hope to have it tonight, but it's taking me a little bit longer because I want to make it compatible to the town's GIS, is a draft sort of zoning layout to give you an idea of what we're looking at. What we ultimately arrived at is that it seems to lay out better to have 2 zones rather than 3. From a layout perspective, you sort of have a core and a transition rather than periphery, based on how the lots are set up, size and use. And then what the periphery will sort of morph into, though we won't create a separate zone, is the area along the river. Because it makes things a little bit more, development in that area obviously is extremely complicated, right? So, next meeting, I'll have a sort of a draft to give you an idea, and we can kind of go through and unpack through it. You can certainly, take a look at this to give you an idea of what it would look like. And then we can kind of go from there and looking at the map, looking at the proposed zone locations, and if the criteria make sense, and if we need to tweak some of the values for whatever it might be related to coverage, or if we want to increase some of the use categories or what have you. But we'll kind of, this will give us that ability to ground truth what we're asking be implemented. So
I know that one of the initial intents of this whole thing was to try to offer some of the existing non-conforming uses some more leadway.
Yep.
By just going down to these 2 zones. Is that going to adversely affect that at all?
So yeah, one of the other things that we talked about, and I made some adjustments to the current proposed regs, is to address that comment that you made at that other previous discussion, to make clear that there aren't going to be additional implications on residential property owners. So we want to move the area where in the direction we want it to go without making it complicated in the interim. So we're going to try to toe that line. I think we've got something that's better than the draft you saw.
Okay.
So you can, but that's.
Because I'm kind of looking at this residential area here where it's kind of split half and or just kind of intersected by the corridor and the transitional. So some of them are kind of in and some of them are out. So I don't know, is it of any advantage to square in that entire residential area?
Well, so
I understand the development along the 140 itself would, you'd have different desires than what's out here in the residential neighborhood.
right. So from a use perspective, I mean, the zones will treat uses differently. Obviously, from a use perspective, it's easy to treat the single family use the same in both zones. The only thing that would change, between core and transition here is that this area becomes less restrictive from a coverage perspective or something.
So are we kind of drawing the line just on that first row of houses that are abutters to 140, or are we going back, into the neighborhood at all?
So I think the idea here is to really pick up that area along the road, but then what we want to do is
Village.
yeah. And create that core.
Yeah.
I mean, we're gonna have to draw the line somewhere, but we're gonna make the map in an ARC online format, so we'll be able to pull it up and look at it.
Look, exactly.
And you'll be able to say, that doesn't make sense, and it'll be a little bit more interactive. But I would suggest, rather than looking at it as a core and transition, really, this will align more closely with some of the stuff we have in the regs now. This is more or less a relaxing of standards too.
Right, so this is where we want to see more development in here.
Right, so this is not more restrictive, this is a little more.
Less restricted, right, so that's why I was kind of thinking that if that's the route, then we just
Oh, yeah.
have it to immediate abutters to 140. Then, that's kind of be the criteria there, that if you have frontage on 140, then it would be in the core section.
Your time is up, can we pass it
Yes,
down?
Okay, Frank, now you can just debunk everything I said.
Hopefully in 2 weeks, it'll make more sense, because we'll be able to show you an actual map.
Great.
2 weeks then. It's just 2 weeks. What is that, 2 weeks?
If I knew ahead of time, I would have just made this into that.
That's the process, though. It's unfolding little by little.
Yeah.
It's a mug, a fury of notes and
Sloppy copy.
get everything up. Yeah, and that's the process. So stay tuned.
Well, glad you guys are working on it and we'll look forward to seeing it at the next meeting. How about the update on the affordable housing plan? I remember the presentation that your partner in your firm did,
Yep.
and he was working on it.
So since that time, we worked with obviously Ruth and first selectman to prepare and draft a survey. And then set that up in SurveyMonkey. It was presented through the town's website, maybe the town's social media, and it was also a hard copy of, not the survey, but like a half-page advertisement was printed and delivered to the schools. So there was, I don't know,
The
600
middle
of them.
school and the elementary, yeah, the stuff backpacks with.
Basically just saying we had an affordable housing plan survey that was available and with a QR code and a link, so they could either just go to the link or hold their phone with QR code and take the survey. So I looked this morning to try to pull, just to give you a little primer of what we're seeing. We have 50 responses so far. And just looking at the dates, they sort of seem to still be coming in. I'd imagine that's
The school.
people digging into the bottom of a backpack and finding a half-page piece of paper. So we'd like to try to keep it open to get something that we feel is substantial enough to make some decisions on, but so these are just preliminary. I just pulled some highlights so you can see 30%, 37% of those who responded live and work in town. And 54% live in town and work outside. There is not a clear definitive consensus on if those that respond feel the current housing availability in town is satisfactory.
What was the percentage that live in town? 54?
Live and work or live in
Live in.
54.
So almost half the respondents don't even live in this town?
They live in this town but work in another town.
No. Well, I thought the 54 was just live.
37.
Oh.
37 live here and work here, 54 live here only, work elsewhere.
Right. So only 54% live in town. We were getting respondents that don't even.
No, this is not, I pulled the sort of the highlights of what the trends we have so far. So there's smaller samples of people that fit other responses. I'm just pulling sort of the.
I was getting this, that,
No,
that we have 43% or 47% people that don't even live in this town and responding to the survey.
Right, and frankly, that was one of the things that we discussed when we were preparing the survey, responses from people don't live here, but right. There could be people similar to the public hearing that you guys had with the tiny houses, people that wanted to live here and didn't find the housing they're looking for. And that could be price, but it could also be location, access to transportation. The type of housing that supports their physical needs. Right, so it is important to know if there's a whole bunch of people that wish they could have lived here, but didn't find a house, that's worth noting. So there are some other smaller percentages. I just didn't pull everything because we're still collecting responses. 52% of people responded thus far agree that housing is an important component to East Windsor's overall prosperity. 41% feel that reasonable housing costs are between $1,000 and $1,250 per month. So we gave them a sliding scale and basically said, what do you think is a reasonable cost for housing? And they had to choose between. And so it went obviously up from there and below. So again, we can use that data to kind of target where housing costs are, what rents look like, and get a sense of what that gap is. 48% feel that increased housing options would improve the town overall, and 35% feel it would negatively impact the town. 65% feel that housing for young families is the type of housing that's most needed. 55% of people feel that Broadbrook is the area of town that's most desirable for additional housing units to be established. And 62% feel that local attitudes pertaining to housing are the biggest obstacle to future development and increased housing opportunities.
Not in my backyard.
Or complete lack of understanding or education as far as what affordable housing is. Right? People think it's a Section 8 housing project that the federal government might have built 50 years ago. So again, that will shift what we want to do in the plan, because if education is a big component, then that will change sort of how the town implements whatever the plan includes. So this isn't everything. There are more questions and more responses, but based upon where we are, some of the stuff that looked like it was trending, to give you some.
Is it? The responses all say wildly different from surveys in other towns, or is it similar?
I think that this, in the responses that I've seen, and I don't know, if this is intentional or not, but this is one of what I would consider to be the most reasonable overall responses to housing cost. People saying $2,500 a month or more is reasonable housing cost.
Yeah.
So that feels like there's a realistic
Avon or
expectation.
something that-
But even, we got that Durham, right, in other, rural communities with really no potential for any commercial grand growth, period. I'm not seeing, I didn't see anything that was really shocking to me. The other thing that we have are a significant number of sort of free-form comments. I think at this point, we were approaching almost 40. So that's where people are just telling us.
what they think.
And I was mentioning to Ruth, the comments there were really far apart. A lot of people saying this is really important. One person commented that she's trying to find housing for her mother who's disabled and couldn't. Another person saying, I'm dealing with this now. I was recently homeless and paying for housing is an issue. A lot of people saying we need to improve our schools, and other people saying we don't want it. We don't want those people here. This brings crime. It will destroy town. So there's a huge disparity.
Yeah.
All of them kind of think of serving, how much you're drinking.
It's true. And so there's other demographic data that we ask people if they're comfortable to give us their age, to give us the income level of their household. They don't have to respond to that, but that will help us kind of parse out where things are trending and what we need to do. But there's going to have to be an educational component to this because people feel that housing opportunities are important. But then, a lot of people are responding that you don't want this here, we don't want this here. And you've got to show the nexus between where people start and where they go, and be interesting to see what.
Being a mathematician, what's the bottom line here? What your conclusion? What's the bottom line
My conclusion of the results or my conclusion of the plan?
of all the statistics you gave us?
Each one's a great place to live.
I think
And you did a-
that much like lots of other people in lots of other communities, people struggle to find really good examples of well-executed housing developments which meet the standards of affordable housing. And so what they do is they focus on the worst example that they can think of housing, and they point to that and think, well, I don't like that, so I don't want this.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can a lot of times, and we talk about this even in other towns, and sometimes you're not sure how it's going to work, but we can show 10 photos of developments and ask people to guess which ones are affordable and which ones are not. We can show them interior photos and say, which ones would you like to live in? Which ones would you like to not live in? Knowing that they're going to choose the affordable projects, not knowing that that's what they are. And then afterwards say, by the way, those are the affordable projects. These are the market rate projects. With the intent of having them say, oh, okay, I guess I need to learn more about this. But that doesn't necessarily land well all the time. It's a bit of a risk. But when you show them what is being built today and how these projects can actually support young families and working professionals. We talked in the office.
So the bottom line is it's education to the public.
That's a big piece to it. Yes,
It seems to be the biggest to me.
that is a big piece to it. You guys are different in that you already have more than 10% affordable housing. So what did- Right.
But some towns don't want to pressure, but
Right.
get the number.
They can't cram that down your throats and say, we're going to build this and there's nothing you can do about it. There are a lot of towns that see that as a friendly opportunity to increase that housing, but there's a lot of data that's supportive of these housing types. Something like, when you talk about families, 90+% of children living in separated households live with their mother. And overwhelmingly, I don't remember the statistic, don't quote me, but the users, the occupants of these housing are single parents, most often single mothers. And so if you effectively turn down affordable housing, you're prohibiting young families, single parents with children, most often single mothers, from being able to locate in your community. And in a town that's seeing declining enrollment and challenges with school costs, et cetera, you've got to provide an opportunity for them to get their foot in the door. So we're going to try to create that narrative, that story, so that everyone who goes through the plan will understand. This is something we have to do if we want to have that balance. That's the goal. That makes one person. That's good.
At this point, you think our sample size is still too small to kind of,
I think it's too small.
we're gonna try to expand the availability of the survey?
Yeah, I mean, we'll do another push online. The other thing we talked about was trying to leverage Melissa and see if she can, reach out to folks through her channels or at.
Maybe we can get Jason to put it on his weekly call.
That would be awesome.
Or it's on.
You tell them you have a link on the town website and on his robocalls and hey, we have a survey, we'd like to know the town's opinion and
Yeah, that would be
please,
great.
please participate.
And it sounds like you did a yeoman's effort to get to the young parents.
Yeah.
But I wonder about the senior community.
Right, and so that's where we can, like you said, work with Melissa to get a sense of what is the most comfortable way for them to participate in the survey. They can go online and it's easy to use. It'll work on a phone. We have hard copies. We created it so that it's printable. They can fill it out that way. And we'll input the results manually.
With the QR code right on the website, so.
Right, this is exactly what we have, yep. Problem is today, everybody is so overloaded with information on a daily basis that it comes and goes like that. You get 10 emails a day, you get 1,000 notifications on your phone. And by Monday, you say, I'm gonna do it by Saturday.
If you don't
It's
do it
too
right
big,
then, it's
yeah.
lost.
No.
It conflicted me.
Yeah, right, exactly. So you're gonna
That's
try
good.
to set it up so that it doesn't take 15 minutes to do, you can do it quickly and. But everybody's demanding a lot of people these days, so.
Thank you for the update. Other questions on that? Okay, no correspondence. Under business meeting, it's the annual election of officers. So the commission has to decide what you want to do.
Let's all start. I'll nominate Mike for chair. Nothing personal.
I'll second that.
Give me a crack at it. At the last meeting, I think you would.
Any discussion? Mike, would you?
Yep.
Yeah, I would accept the nomination.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. Mike is chair.
Boy.
I get out on my mouth too much.
Perfect time for retirement.
Okay, we need a vice chair.
I'd like to make a motion for Jim to be vice chair.
Oh, and I will second that.
That I never vote for him.
Yeah, I know, I'm impressed.
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay,
You sure, Jim?
Yeah, why not? I did it for a year before. Sure.
Done that, Jim.
I run it for a year, I can put it for a year, then I'll pass it up. So Dave will be next.
You know, I take a lot of vacations.
Make sure Dave's gonna listen and then Joe.
He may not be.
I can work here till I retire, okay, but I'm working.
okay.
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's unanimous. So Jim's your vice chair. And then we need a secretary.
I'll nominate Dave. Or Ann, if Dave doesn't want to do it. Second. Sure.
Okay,
I was secretary for like 8 years.
Okay. Sure, yes, I'll do it.
okay,
I'll try it, yes.
okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
And next year. And next year, what's been up, Joel will be chair. Chairman next year. There's a rule there.
Okay,
I'll figure it out, all right.
executive session.
Should we remind folks that the next meeting's gonna be at Scout Hall?
Okay, to be on location. ready.
Yeah.
Election day.
Yep.
Is there a big get to bring in? the
We're
owl?
gonna borrow an owl from the school.
Okay.
We use last-
We just have to get the Wi-Fi password.
There is no password. You're in the building, you get Wi-Fi.
Well, that makes sense.
According to
that's
Paul
nice.
Knight. So, that's what he said. Who else is in the building?
Okay.
Oh,
Then, motion to adjourn would be in,
I'm on a roll, like a motion to adjourn.
is there a second?
Second. I'll go back to- Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Uh,
We still got this.
Yeah, we got the next meeting.
Yeah, this is what I'm.
There's,
Then I will know.
Yeah, it's like 3 minutes.
Yeah, it's gonna be quick.
1, 2, 3. Well, I said if I go to battle, no.
I'll catch you up if you do.
Everybody inside.
Aquifer Protection Agency meeting to order. It is 7:46. We have a quorum with all of our members present. And we have minutes attached to the agenda.
Did I slide it over?
Here you go, Mike.
Okay. I had it when I walked in. but what's that?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I do, sure.
No worries. Yeah, yeah.
The agenda?
No, he just doesn't have the.
Aquifer Protection.
Yeah,
I guarantee you,
I mean, here it is.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, is everybody okay with the minutes?
Yeah.
Yep, okay. That motion to approve the minutes would be in order.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of our special aquifer protection meeting held on April 26, 2022, as presented. Meeting number 1825.
Oh,
In the minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous.
Oh.
Oh, okay, staff report then. Have memo from Ruth Ann.
So I've spent a good amount of time with 95 Rye Street on their registration. Having a site visit along with the Regional Water Authority and Regional Connecticut Water Company. They are presently working on a materials management plan for the site. They have a tenant who's leaving at the end of this month. There's future plans for the building that's actually less of an impact or risk, right? And they do have another tenant who does automotive repair in the back. And Kim Dearborn is working with that property, that tenant on the materials management plan. So there are some issues that they need to address for mitigating risk. And it has to do with providing secondary containment for, they have waste oil and fuel oil and, liquid product that they use in automotive repair. And then there's an outdoor above ground oil tank that Mr. Dearborn is, he'll remove it rather than build secondary containment around it and cover over it, so. The other piece is they need to pave out there to protect against spillage getting into the ground.
Abe or
So-
Billings?
Pave. And so they've got their quotes in, and I think they're just waiting for cash flow. They have some, well, it'll end up being next year. It's moving forward slowly.
Floor drains in them garages or no?
No, there was one bay that once had a car wash in it that had been abandoned and filled, yeah.
So they got no oil, water separator up there, nothing. Just runs right off into the parking lot.
To the parking lot.
You did that there.
So pavement will help that situation out there. And I attached to your memos some photo, the response letter from the site visit to the Dearborns, and there's some photos in there. She can see here, some of the issues. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, I'll be over at Nutrien. Bill Syme is gonna take us through that property and facility. They still need to register and develop the same things, all the same issues with the material management plan, and there might be some areas that they need to address. Depends on what we see during the site visit. We had reached out to them earlier in the year. They have a remote, they have corporate, but didn't really respond. And so when I found out it was you who told me, Bill Syme.
Bill,
But I caught him right at the beginning of the growing season, so we've been delayed. So now,
I'm surprised, that's a big company over there.
yeah,
They're
twice I
surprised.
reached out.
Yeah.
And then 33 Apothecaries Hall Road, it doesn't fall under the category that would need to register. But while I was out there doing a site visit for their annual compliance review, I did talk to Herb Holden about the best management practices, and we'll be circling back with him. It really had to do with some drum storage and being ready for spill response. There was a fire on a piece of equipment that it was extinguished, but I don't really know how that fire was put out, and like, was that a bunch of foam? Because that could be an issue. So slow and steady. We're making progress, but
Well, fortunately, we don't have a lot of sites. through there.
we're very fortunate, very fortunate. And we just keep picking at this one and bring these folks into a place that there's more control.
It seems like we're stalled at the mill site though.
The mill site,
It seems like they stalled out again.
yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
really sure. I know that we had actually made inquiry about bringing potential redevelopment in there, and that kind of sent them back to their corporate structure to get permission. And so they're risk adverse and working through attorneys to have people sign off so that they can get a peek into the buildings and assess, the viability of some type of redevelopment.
They were going crazy with a remediation and then all of a sudden it seems like
Well, they were doing a lot of
boring testing.
borings and
Yeah.
testings, and the way that really works is they pull information together and come up with a plan, and then a scientist up at the deep reviews all that information and says, I need a little more information. So they-
Just keep
Yeah,
sticking
so
the can down the
they
road.
go back out and they do some more borings and samples.
Crap.
I
A
can't,
lot of crap to ground.
Yeah, I
people.
I can't draw that line, you're doing connect the dots, right? So the more information you get, the more you know you don't have. So it's a vicious cycle. So, yeah, they've been out there drilling, that's all I've heard, that and the access issue. So I know that's happening there.
10 years later, we'll still be dealing with.
Well, it's just concerned to me, it's sitting right on top of the aquifer also.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
Yeah, and we've clued in the Connecticut Water Company to anything going on over there. Anything that comes before a border commission,
Mhm.
we have to notify the water company so that they can assess and comment as they see fit.
Are there any borings on that site out there? Any like monitoring wells been established?
They have monitoring wells out there.
So are we seeing any migration or anything like that?
I don't know the answer
We're
to
not,
that
we're not
question.
privy to that
Well, I think
information.
if, yeah, I don't. I would think we could get it from the state.
Well, I mean, that would kind of hasten if we are seeing
Mhm.
migration. But they would need to respond quickly.
Could be some sort of carbon treat. I think they have natural attenuation going on there.
They do, they're constantly pulling 55s out of their crumbs of dirt.
Well, I just mean they're just dilution is the solution
Right.
over time.
No,
Yeah.
But
no water scrubber.
It's-
nothing like
it's
that.
funny, over the summer, they
There's
were,
no carbon, there's nothing happening.
over the summer, they seem to have migrated more towards the river and that side.
That's probably
versus-
where the data gaps were.
Yeah,
Yeah,
versus where the building and where they've been testing up on the top of the hill.
and they had identified, I'll say hotspots for a better word, that, you know, that they wanted to get to, pull that out. So.
That's the blue ditch or the red ditch.
Let's just call it, someday we can call it the cleaned up ditch, okay?
Okay, the next thing we have to do is establish the meeting dates for 2023. Actually, says 2022 quarterly meeting dates. Are the dates right?
I just checked, they do correspond with
Okay.
our regular meetings also.
Good. And then that I was confused by it being held on the second and fourth Tuesdays of each month, so I would strike that and just
Oh, yeah, okay.
it'll be
No,
held
good.
immediately following the commission meetings.
Yeah. Thank you.
We don't need any of this, all we have to do is approve the dates.
Yep.
Well, make a motion that we approve the quarterly meeting dates for the 2023 aquifer protection meetings for January 24th, April 25th, July 25th, and October 24th of 2023.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. So a motion to adjourn unless there's discussion. Something.
I'll go 2 for 2, make a motion to adjourn.
What, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? And how do people vote?
Oh, I.
Aye. Okay,
Aye.
we're adjourned at 7:57.
Hear that?
Still tonight?
Sorry, scribble.
Oh, all right, well, hey, from what I understand, they gave that